if I was going to be public about the work I do, I needed to just be as honest as I could about my own journey in the hopes that at best it could be inspiring to some people, but at worst, at least it doesn't lead them to think that life was always perfect.
Welcome to Flip Your Script, the podcast about life's critical turning points and how people find the inspiration and motivation to move forward and rewrite their unique stories. Flip Your Script is produced by Media Minefield, a public relations firm passionate about the power of sharing stories. Specializing in earned and social media, Media Minefield helps clients take control of their unique story and message. The show is hosted by Kristi Piehl, founder and CEO of Media Minefield, who flipped her script from an Emmy-winning journalist to a successful entrepreneur and speaker.
When you meet accomplished adults, they don't need to share the grit, pain, and mess that is often part of the mythical path to success. Let's be honest, there are some data points that don't ever have to be disclosed, like a high school GPA. So it always impresses me when someone is willing to go beyond the social media bio and talk about the how and the why and the reality. Todd Rose has quite a flip your script story. How does someone go from dropping out of high school with a 0.9, yes, a 0.9 GPA, to a Harvard professor and founder of a think tank? Todd is going to share the story with us. Welcome to the podcast, Todd.
Thank you for having me.
So I said it in the intro, but you don't ever have to tell anyone some parts of your story. You could just and here's who I am today. I'm accomplished. I'm amazing. Don't ask me questions about the past. So why do you share the 0.9 GPA part of your story?
Yeah, well, it's funny. You're really saying something that I thought a lot about, which is, the truth is a lot of me would rather not share it, right? It's like, hey, I screwed up and now I'm not a screw up, right? Like that. But for me, it came down to, I think we have this very sanitized view of the way people live the lives they want to live. And it can lead people to have the impression that unless you've got this perfect life and you've made all the right decisions all along the way, that it's almost like that's it, right? There's no other path. And so I think that can lead to a self-fulfilling prophecy where it's like people stop really believing in themselves. And so I felt like, if I was going to be public about the work I do, I needed to just be as honest as I could about my own journey in the hopes that at best it could be inspiring to some people, but at worst, at least it doesn't lead them to think that life was always perfect.
Right. That's a really good point, because people could assume then that you came from a storied childhood. You had all of the benefits. You waited a long time to get married and have children till you were financially secure. You made all of these amazing decisions, and then voila, of course, you're a Harvard professor. But that isn't your story, and it's not most people's story. And so if someone makes a mistake in high school or middle school, and then they think, well, that's it, there goes my dream, all I can do is fill in the blank. I don't want to do this, but I guess that's all I can do. That's not true. And people need to hear stories like yours so they know that your mistakes don't define you.
Right. And in fact, in my case, I believe my mistakes actually opened up a new horizon that allowed me to make future choices that I'm not sure I would have made had things been just fine earlier in my life.
And then they're not really mistakes at all, right?
That's right.
So I've alluded to it, but I from high school to babies, that was a short window of time for you. So what happened in high school? 0.9 GPA almost seems like you're not going to class.
Which eventually that's what it was too. You have to work really hard to get a 0.9 GPA. I'll tell you. For me, it was, I grew up in rural America and in a town that really prized conformity, and it was never really a good fit with who I was. But in education, mistakes snowball, right? You do poorly one time, first of all, you don't understand the material, so the next time you're not going to understand the next material. But also, you kind of get a reputation, right? And I've been on both sides of that, right? When people think I'm smart, boy, they give you the benefit of the doubt. It's amazing, right? When I was viewed as a straight A student in college, if I didn't understand something, quite often the professor would say, well, boy, I must not have done a good job explaining it if even you don't get it. But when you're struggling, it's sort of like it's expected. And it just didn't work. And I had a role in it, right? But, it culminated in, I like to say I left school, but the truth is they told me like, I had to leave because I couldn't graduate. And it makes me feel better when I say we mutually agreed to part ways.
So you leave school, you mutually part ways with the establishment of education.
That's right.
You're 18 years old. You have, you fall in love with someone in high school and you get married, have a baby. How do you get from that to, you're laughing. I think, did I gloss over that?
No, it's great. That's just funny. It's like, I always think to myself, boy, if it was my kids going through that, I'd be flat out panicked. Right. But, not too long after I mutually, we parted ways at school. My girlfriend at the time, who's still my wife today, found out she was pregnant, which also in the place I grew up was not really. And I would say for most people, that's not a good way to start your adult life. But 2 years after that, going on, we actually had 2 kids. I had worked 10 different minimum wage jobs. Just they're the kind of jobs you just can't even imagine, that you can get if you don't have a high school diploma. And we ended up on welfare, and that was sort of rock bottom. And the job that I had at the time, this is no kidding. I literally, my job was I gave enemas to people. I would drive around.
No.
Yeah. It like, I because it paid $1 more an hour than the job I was working in an electronics store selling computers. And so I got a certified nurse assistant little certificate. And this home healthcare company, they said, here's where we really need people, and you can drive around. And it's honest work. Somebody has to do it, but that is not a sustainable career.
I mean, first of all, a couple of things about that surprised me. Number one, that they don't have like nurses doing it. I don't know if I need someone to come to my house and give me an enema if I want a high school dropout. Like, no offense, but
yeah, it's not terribly technical. I got to be honest.
Okay, good to know. Good to know. So how many enemas did you give before you decided that there was more for you in the world?
That job only lasted for 3 months. And I was like, there's got to be something more. And at the time, a lot of people were frustrated with me. And in some ways, rightfully so, because it didn't look like I could hold a job. And my father-in-law even said, look, I just think you're lazy. And, he was kind of a fire brimstone, like old school. And I was starting to internalize that as well. Like, maybe that is just who I am. And, this is terrible. And my dad happened to give me some really good advice in the moment. And, he was the first high school graduate in our entire family and went to college and actually ended up as a mechanical engineer, has a lot of patents on airbags that he designed. Anyway, I'm really proud of him. He just retired this year. But he said, I don't think you're lazy. He said, I just think you have to be motivated all the time. And he said, whenever I see that you're motivated, you're as good as anybody at anything. And it's true. If I don't care about what I'm doing, I would be the worst employee ever, or worse at anything. And he said, look, I think there's a path where you could actually make good money and do things you really love, but you can't get there from where you are right now. And he thought I could either be an entrepreneur or go to college. And since I had $13 in the bank account, and I still don't think I'd be a very good business person, but I thought, well, I probably need to try college. And which is funny because since school had been so terrible for me, it was out of desperation. So my family, my in-laws, my parents cobbled together what little money we had, and they could pay for 1 year of school at Weber State University. It was like $800 a term. It wasn't even, but it was more than we really had. And so I started going to school. And it was actually that experience out of necessity. And I can tell you a few specific examples that completely changed how I saw myself and what I was capable of, and really put me on a different path.
So before we get to an example or two, because I think that they're probably very valuable, I think one of the things that is so probably fundamentally important about your story is that you had people who still believed in you. Well, I suspect that your in-laws weren't thrilled that you got their high school teenage daughter pregnant and you dropped out of college. That wasn't probably the path they had dreamt for their daughter, or their son-in-law giving enemas to people because it paid a little bit more. However, they still believed in you. They didn't just say yeah, never come back. Good luck with you on welfare. And your parents too, I suspect. This wasn't the path they had dreamed for you either, but they didn't just write you off. They saw the spark, and that's so important, because had they just locked the door, where would you be today?
No, that's right. And I think when I think about my story, even leading up to today, it's really a story of, working hard and learning how to make good choices, but it's a story of relationships and a story of other people believing in me at the right time and helping me see that in myself. And the truth is that aspect of having people believe in you, it's a two-way street, in the sense that, like, you'd be shocked at how many people really do believe in you, even if they're not vocal about it. But also seeking that out and trying to, like, discover that. It's fundamental. You're 100% correct.
So you said that you had a couple of examples. So you go to school thinking that other people believe that I can do this. And frankly, because you had these two little ones, you sort of had to figure something out. It wasn't really just you.
No, and at the time I didn't even think people believed in me. That was but then realizing they wouldn't be giving me their money, but it was almost like, we'll see, right? But it was necessity. It was like, I didn't know where I wanted to go, but I knew that where I was, I didn't want that. I wanted to do better for my family, better for myself, even if I didn't know what better really looked like yet. So the thing that I knew for sure, so I enrolled it. I had to go to school at night, because I had to work during the day. And the thing I knew for sure is whatever I had done before didn't work. And, my dad, again, gave me some really good advice, because the school counselor said, well, look, you failed algebra 3 times. He's looking at all my transcripts. Said, you should take remedial math. You should take remedial English. Of course, remedial math is the most taken and failed class in college in the United States. So that's really not good advice to go to. My dad said, you should pick things that you are absolutely interested in, because you don't have study habits and skills, and you need to build those up. So I was very careful about picking the classes I was taking. And what I realized really quickly, and this became like a defining thing for me in my life and even in my scientific career, is what I learned is how important fit is to talent and achievement, right? You tend to think that it's just like there are people, you're smart or you're not, or whatever. Man, getting the right fit between your individuality and the environment you're in is everything. And I can give you one, probably the most defining experience for me about that, if you'd like.
Please.
Okay, so I was plugging away at Weber State, doing okay. I actually I didn't know what I was going to major in. I think I had marketing or something like that at first. And I'm sitting in this massive auditorium, this history class, this lecture, and that's the worst kind of learning for me. And I was telling my friend Steve, who was sitting next to me as class wrapped up, this is just awful. And he says, well, it's not as bad as what he'd got himself into in the honors program, which I didn't know what that was. I thought honors would just be the same, but more work. And he says, oh, no. It's so much worse than that. He's like, there aren't lectures. We just small classes and we just debate things. He said, there aren't tests. You just have to write essays and argue. And he said, I'm not even sure there are right answers. He just and for him, that seemed like hell, right? And I was thinking, well, this sounds amazing. How is this a thing? And so class ends and I'm like, I want to be in the honors program. And it was on the second floor of the library at the top of the hill. So I just went right up there and I got in a meeting with the director and I said, hey, I want to be in the honors program. And he says, well, great, come sit down. And he's really proud of it. And he said, okay, just a few questions. What was your ACT score? Because we did ACTs, not SATs. And I told him it was on the low end of the curve. And he said, well, that's okay. Not everyone's good at taking standardized tests. He said, what was your high school GPA?
Next question.
Said, yeah, exactly. I said 0.9. I said 0.9. And this is no kidding. He said, what 0.9? So I told him 0.9. And he said, well, you obviously can't be in the honors program. And it just dawned right there. I just got so embarrassed because I realized I just rushed into this thing and didn't think about it. And then I felt humiliated. So as fast as I could, I'm grabbing my stuff and I'm apologizing and thanking him. And I reach out, shake his hand, and I go to leave and I walk out the door. And his secretary, a woman named Marilyn Diamond, who's my guardian angel to this day, she's sitting there. Her desk is right outside the office. And I come walking out there just wanting to get out as fast as possible. And as I walked past her, she reached out and she grabbed my arm and she said, you know, I overheard the conversation. If you want this, don't take no for an answer. And I thought, I didn't know that was a thing you could do, right? And she said, look, if you really want to be in the honors program, sit on the couch here and don't leave until I let you in.
Marilyn, that's amazing.
Right? And so I did. It felt like I was there all day. It was probably like 3 hours. But he comes out a couple of times. What are you doing here? And I say, I want to be in the honors program. You can't be in the honors program. So he goes and teaches a class, comes back, the director that is. And he finally just says, okay, look, come back in here. And he says, explain to me why you want to be in the honors program, because I don't see it. I don't understand it. So I told him what I'd learned about myself, about how I learned best and how I thought this was a perfect fit, right? Despite my track record. And he said, well, I'll tell you what, I'm going to let you in on a provisional basis. You get to choose one class. And if you do well in it, I'll let you choose another and we'll go from there. So I picked one class. It was called Plagues of the Modern Era. It almost made me a vegan, but
you've been giving enemas. So like plagues, enemas.
Yeah, it felt fine, right? Like, and I did well. And I learned, it's funny because someone who should be in remedial classes is now in the honors program, but it was such a perfect fit. So flash forward, I graduated as the honors student of the year, years later, with a 3.97 GPA in psychology and pre-med, and then got into Harvard for my doctorate. But look, I mean, I could give you a dozen stories like that, but here's a moment where, like, if it weren't for somebody who I didn't even know and believing in me, and that moment changes the course of my life. And I'll tell you one last thing and then I'll shut up. But I got to go back to say they were honoring me just a few years ago at the same time Marilyn Diamond was retiring. And they said, well, wouldn't it be great for you to say some things? And I thought, oh, this is fantastic. I'm going to use this opportunity for this award to really like tell Marilyn in front of everyone, you know, how much she had meant to me. So I tell the story and they ask Marilyn, say, well, Marilyn, do you want to come up and say something? And she does. And she gets up and she said, listen, I got to be honest. I don't remember that.
Because she probably did that all the time.
Exactly right. It turns out I was one. First of all, I was a little devastated at first. I thought I was so special. Look, she did it for everybody. She was someone who just believed in people and would take that opportunity. And it turns out like just countless numbers of stories. But it really taught me something, which is like the ability to change other people's lives doesn't have to require some monumental effort on your part. Like these small moments that seem trivial to you can be life-changing for the people around you.
There's so much to unpack in that, but Marilyn had the words, and what Marilyn did is she gave you the hope, but she didn't helicopter you. She didn't nag you. She didn't follow up and like knock on your door and make sure you're doing your homework. She just gave you the opportunity, gave you some advice, and then it's up to you to do the work.
Yeah. And right, that's it, right? No one can drag you over the finish line. And if you need someone to, that's a different problem, right? But never underestimate that timely advice, the timely encouragement that allows you to continue on and make a decision that, again, just life altering.
And it could have been just as easy for Marilyn, who heard that whole conversation as you walked out of that office, for her to be laughing her head off and like, nice try. And that would have also potentially changed the course of your life. So she had she had, 2 minutes or whatever. It didn't take very long words. And she could have chosen whatever words she wanted. And those were the ones that she selected. And what an impact.
And you're on to something there, which is you could have imagined her as being neutral or nothing, but in fact, the way she responds there either solidifies for me how inappropriate it was for me to even assume that I could aspire to something more than what I'd earned from my lack of, my performance to date in education. And I always think about that the responsibility we have and the way we engage with other people around us, and recognizing that our words matter, our deeds matter, they affect people. And if we see that and recognize that and take it as a responsibility, I think it's a power that we have to make the world better for other people and for ourselves.
I would love to go back in a time machine and like interview your in-laws and your parents, like the minute that you started college and then also the day that you graduate and get accepted to Harvard. Because like, were they taking bets on how long you'd stay in school? And then
Yeah.
it's amazing. I mean, that's 4 years of time that really shifted not just the course of your life, your wife's life, your children's life, generationally impactful. And that could have gone two different ways.
Yeah. And, I personally don't really care that much about accolades because I always worry that when you start looking at the trophies or the diplomas, you stop looking at the future. And I'm always terrified of like, there's just so much more I want to do. But the one thing that I am the most proud of is like, when I got into Harvard, because again, this is an open enrollment community school, wonderful education, but not a lot of people go to Harvard from Weber State. I mean, they could, they just don't. But, my mom was always like, we grew up in a rural Utah, and she was someone who wasn't going to be told what to do. Right. So I got my fighting spirit from her. So she, my whole childhood was pretty difficult childhood. And she was always being told what a bad mother she was, right? And like a lot of her choices that she should have done X instead of Y. And so there was something that was very, very satisfying when there was in the front page of the state newspaper, the biggest newspaper in the state, was a story of me with my mom and all that. That was that felt good because I felt like it was validation for her that her belief in me was not unfounded and her willingness to fight for me was paid off.
Testament to a lot of, as parents, I think we drop gems. We think they're gems, right? With our kids. And we think like, I don't even think they're listening. But turns out sometimes they listen, right? And sometimes it, pays off. So I'm interested, Todd, when did you realize you were smart?
What I realized is I had woefully overestimated what smart is. Like, you kind of see it as this like apex of this really rarefied air. But the truth is, and this will sound cliche, but this is now what I study. I mean, part of what I say scientifically, smart isn't one thing, right? The ability to achieve at high levels is not this narrow concept. It is so rich and there's so many outlets and so many pathways that the truth is like, there isn't anyone who isn't capable of high levels of achievement. And so, yeah, in terms of feeling smart, I went through, I kept trying to explain it away. Well, I got an A in this class. It was probably just a professor or class. It was actually, I will tell you that the moment I thought, okay, this is different. And this is where my dad would tell the same story is my end of my second year, I finally couldn't avoid math any longer. So I had to take statistics, and it turns out that like, I just had an intuitive grasp. I don't know why. And I ended up not only acing the class, I was asked to be a teaching fellow the next year. So I felt like, okay, like this is pretty good. And then, for a long time, you're still going to have like an imposter syndrome. I actually think that like, that's most people, that if you're really striving and you're really getting outside your comfort zone enough, you're going to feel like an imposter sometimes. And for me, and I can tell you another story when I got to Harvard that really came home, where you just have to realize that we're all fighting the same fight and we're all having those same feelings. And you just have to know what you want out of life and just keep pushing forward. And yeah.
Comes back to that fit though, doesn't it?
It really does. And it doesn't, you have a lot more control over the fit than you really realize.
And there's so many options because somewhere out there, someone who probably is offended by now and maybe has already turned this off is like, I love enemas. I am the best enema giver. How dare, but like that is their fit, right? And people are out there.
It's what's so shocking. We've spent a lot of time studying success, the ways people get there, the different pathways, what it means. A couple of things that show up in our research is number one, we all assume everybody cares about what we care about, right? And to your point, so we actually did a matrix of looking at every job that's available, because people say, well, listen, somebody's got to be X, like somebody's got to be the sanitation person, someone's got to give enemas, as if nobody would ever want to do that. Mm-hmm. And what you find is that, look, the thing you don't like, there's somebody out there that's like, I would love to do that, either directly for that work or what that work allows them to do in other places. I'm always just shocked by how individual it is in terms of the fulfilling lives people lead.
And we skipped over the Harvard part, and I want to make sure that you have an opportunity to tell the story, because I can't imagine a kid who has your educational history and then suddenly is given like keys to a classroom at Harvard and said, okay, now you teach the kids that got whatever on their ACT numbers that could have been, you had a 0.9. These kids are coming in with like a 4.9, right? Because they do that in high school now, which I still don't get how you get more than a 4.0, but that's a different topic. So how did you feel like you were worthy to teach them?
It took a while. I had a really terrible first experience, which was a really like a learning experience for me. What I just realized is you got to get out of comparing yourself to people. I know we say that all the time, but it's so destructive. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, continue to develop yourself, continue to try to contribute, and the rest takes care of itself. But here's the experience I had, which was almost derailed my whole. So we get to Harvard. So first, I didn't know where Harvard was. Like, I did not realize. Like, I grew up on a farm. Like, it's not like, So we had packed up everything we had in a little station or a minivan and a little U-Haul trailer and drove across the country to Cambridge, Massachusetts. I literally didn't even realize there was such a thing called toll roads. So we had only enough cash. Like, we were trying to get there, and we get to like Chicago, and suddenly they're charging us like $1 to drive on the road. I literally ended up running out. I had to write checks for the tolls because I didn't have any money. But and when we got there in Cambridge, we actually got in a car wreck 6 days after we got there, and it broke my 3.5-year-old son's femur in half. He was in a full body cast. I had to spend all my student loan money on hospital stuff. So we're just like, what is going on? So one of the first classes I took was by the really famous psychologist, who I won't name here because he's a good mentor of me now, but he was a notoriously like hard-nosed guy. So I felt like an imposter. I felt like I didn't belong. All these people with backgrounds and pedigrees that I don't know where. And I thought, well, you know what? I'm still a good student. So once we get into the work, I know I'm good at this. And I thought I was good at writing. And the first paper I wrote in this class, this professor, I get it back. Not only didn't I not do well, I essentially failed. And he wrote at the bottom, judging by your performance on this paper, I don't think you have the writing ability to succeed in graduate school.
Wow.
I was like, I thought I was good at that. And I literally like left class, cried the whole way home, wanted to leave. What am I doing? I dragged my family out here for my own pride just to but I didn't. And so what I did was, and it was a little humiliating at first, but I'm so glad I did. I knew, look, at the end of the day, he wasn't wrong. You know what I mean? There's some tough love. He could have said it a little nicer, but if I looked at it, like, it just wasn't up to par. So they had a writing support for grad students, but I didn't want to go there because I'd tell my peers basically that I can't write. So for undergrads, they have this one in Lamont Library, and it was like run by these students. And this one young woman who was in her second year of undergrad, and she looked like she was 13. And I kind of went in there. I said, listen, I need some help. And she said, well, this is just for undergrads. And I said, I really need some help. And she was so kind. She said, well, look, I can't help you on what I get paid for here, but if you'll come back at 2:00 every day on Tuesdays, I will help you. So I did, and she did. And from her help, I learned to write. I actually ended up getting an A in that class. And now I'm an author of multiple commercial books. So once again, we're back to the kindness and belief of other people in the right times, make all the difference in the world.
Did you have a little satisfaction when you gave that mentor your first book?
Yes. And in fact, he actually wrote a blurb for it. So it's, that's the hardest thing, right? When you're going to try to continue to improve and achieve, and you're always out on a ledge. You're always out of your comfort zone. And everything in your brain is screaming, go back to the safety of what you know. But boy, that is not a good idea. And once you get comfortable with the fact that like this journey into a more fulfilling life and higher levels of achievement is going to require that you are constantly losing your footing, right? But, as I can't remember who said the famous quote, like, to venture out like that is to lose your footing, to not is to lose yourself. So
it's so much truth in that, because I think there's this concept that like we get to a place and then we're good. We don't need to learn anymore. We don't need to see anymore. We don't need to whatever it is. And to that point, you're learning or you're dying. I don't mean physically, but you're either getting better or you're getting worse. There isn't a staying in the middle.
No, that's exactly right. As human beings, we have an innate desire to get better, to master things, to grow. And it's fundamentally about survival. And so you're right. Like once you realize treading water isn't actually an option, it's an illusion, right? That you are actually going backwards. And to me, I personally just really enjoy constantly growing and changing. But that means that like I am going to have a higher rate of failure too, right? Like there's just no way that you can continue to push the envelope and try to expand what a fulfilling life is without having some wrong turns sometimes. And in a lot of my research on this kind of stuff, we have learned a lot about how you do that in a more systematic way so that you minimize the worst case scenarios, but you can really open yourself up to a world that you just don't even realize is possible.
And you've said it a couple of times, and I think it's really important that you talk about a fulfilling life, which is different from a successful life. And they can be the same things for certain people, but I think this goal of wanting success or getting the thing or this materialistic definition is so different from a fulfilling life. And if we all thought about living a fulfilling life and defining what fulfilling is to us, there would be a lot happier and helped people on the planet.
Yeah. And it's funny, we at my think tank, we do like private opinion research, which is like not just what you'll say out loud, but what do you really, really think? And we did the largest study ever on people's private views of a successful life. And what was shocking is out of 76 different trade-off priorities you could have. And again, you can't game these methods. So it's like really getting at your own trade-off priorities. Here's what was so fascinating. What people care about the most is not what you think people care about. And we have a term for it. It's called the collective illusion. So let me give you an example, how wrong we are about each other right now. The overwhelming majority of Americans across all demographics, when they think about a successful life, they think about fulfillment. They want to do stuff that matters to them, right? They want to have meaning and purpose. It's about relationships and contribution. But when you ask them what they think most Americans would say, they think it is all about fame and fortune. They think people, in fact, to put a finer point on it, out of the 76 trade-off priorities, people thought that most Americans would place being famous as the number one thing that matters to them for a successful life. In reality, it is dead last. So most of us, I can tell you, we've done more research than anybody on this subject. Most people around you have the same conception, right? It's about achieving on things that matter to you, even if they don't matter to other people. It's about making a contribution, right? It's certainly not zero sum. Most Americans don't see success as somebody has to lose. But we are so wrong about each other that we are utterly convinced that 95% of Americans just want it's comparative, zero sum. It's about money, status, power, and it's not true. And so in an effort to show people how successful we are, we deviate from the lives we want to live, thinking we're trying to live the lives everybody else wants to live, and it's just not true. And we end up unbelievably unhappy, unfulfilled, and unaccomplished.
And that's across different age groups?
Yeah, it is the most robust finding we've ever had. Is just we are so, even younger people who will say, you know what, I actually you do see this trend toward a more fulfilling life as the view of success the younger you get, but the illusion is even stronger. So even though folks that like as you get younger, millennials, Gen X, like care a lot more about this meaning and purpose, they are wildly convinced that everybody else is still about wealth, status, power.
How do we fix that?
So from my perspective, when there's a collective illusion, you've got to puncture that illusion, right? Because we're trying to conform to an ideal that doesn't really exist and that nobody really wants. And by conforming to that, we're actually reinforcing it for everybody else, right? We're part of the illusion now. And so we do a number of things. First of all, I think each one of us can contribute by literally staying true to who we are and sharing that with each other rather than hiding it, thinking that you're just kind of weird and one off and people won't understand. In fact, in our research, people wouldn't tell, they said they wouldn't even tell their best friends how they thought about a successful life because they didn't think they would understand.
That's so sad.
You know, we have to have the conversation. And so we have some really fun work and other things where we work with like Hollywood, showrunners, TV producers, where we find private opinion, we find collective illusions, and we will layer in the true views that people have into TV shows. Because it turns out, like, when you hear it in those places, it is actually much more powerful for you in terms of, well, this must be what people believe, because why would it be on, Modern Family or whatever TV show? So we have some good tools at our disposal for puncturing these illusions.
And maybe that's why a show like Ted Lasso right now is doing so incredible, because that, to me, is just the best example of doing just that.
It's exactly right. So you look at Ted Lasso as a character, as a show, the themes are so close in tracking with what we know about the trade-off priorities that people have for the kind of lives they want to live, that it's funny. It looks like it came out of nowhere. And this is one of the fun things that we get to do with Hollywood executives is like, listen, finding these illusions and you find what people really want, and you can create shows that look like they just, again, come out of nowhere. But in fact, it was the most predictable thing you could have ever had. Like, this is the kind of life people want to live. And they need to see examples of it. They create like a permission structure for them to do it.
And when we see that, so many people jump onto it and it's a trend. Like now I see tons and tons of people on social putting out those little, I don't know if you, sounds like you watched Ted Lasso, but yellow sign that says believe, teachers are putting those out there all over the place. And that's not a new concept, but it's like he gave us permission to just be authentic with other people.
That's right.
Who we didn't think we could be authentic with.
That's right. And now, for listeners, you think, well, yeah, okay, so if you're a Hollywood executive, if you're an actor, but what we're underestimating, we're not those people necessarily, most of us, but we are Marilyn Diamond, right? Each one of us. And you will be shocked through your own behavior, right? Through making sure that who you are in private is how you show up in the world, and that you don't hide that because you're worried that other people won't understand, and just living that truth and thinking about how your choices affect just the people around you, you'll be shocked at the kind of impact you can have.
And you had that impact. You went to Harvard, you become a professor there, you write books, you have a think tank. Like, how does one decide that they're going to start a think tank? Because that sounds very heady for someone who struggled with the educational system so strongly. So,
I was very fortunate when I got to Harvard. My mentor there, a scientist named Kurt Fisher, who just recently passed away, he had a blue collar background, and he saw something in me, and like that's why I got in. There were only 8 of us originally in that cohort, and one of the most amazing things that I still cherish is, a few years back when Kurt retired, I was a professor. I was actually able to become the director of the Mind, Brain, and Education program that he founded, that I went to as a student. And so for 4 years, I was the director of that program. But here's the thing, all of my work on individuality, on, fulfillment, on these things, I realized that that I didn't really believe in the institutions. Like there's something really wrong in our society when we allow higher education to be like, quality is scarcity. It's actually about how few people you educate, right? Like, Harvard hasn't added any new seats. We have $40-something billion endowment, $50 billion endowment. but you can't, right? If you educate more people, you look like you're not exclusive, you fall in the ranking. It's just like something's wrong there when we're not about developing as many people's talents as possible so they can make their best contribution. Like something's just wrong. And so I realized, even though I thought I had reached the end, and I was like, great, I want to be a tenured professor at Harvard. I mean, are you kidding me? Like, that's great. And I remember a few years back realizing that, like, actually, if I was honest with myself, this isn't actually the end for me. And there's things I want to accomplish that are more practical. Like, I wanted to be in the world. I want to be able to do the research I want to do, but I care about what happens in society. And so I knew that I would have to leave Harvard. And in fact, as of last year, I did. I started doing both for a little while. And that was scary, because it's like, I'm telling everyone in my books, like pursuing fulfillment is how you get to excellence. It's about fit. And then here I am, where, if I'm honest with myself, I know that this isn't right, but I loved, doesn't matter where you go in the world, man, if you're a Harvard professor, they just assume you're smart. Like, it is such privilege. It's ridiculous, right? And I just benefited from it. And I realized that my identity was starting to really be dependent on that in very unhealthy ways. And that I was starting to take fewer risks in the things that I wanted to do. And I just, made a deal with another colleague at Harvard. And we said, okay, we're going to take our work outside of academia, and we're going to start this new entity that will allow us to do the research we want to do. But then we get to do stuff like engage in culture with Hollywood, and we get to do systems change work, really whatever we think is interesting. And that's been like the best thing that ever happened. I still love my colleagues at Harvard, but I can't believe, there's no way that my life would be this wonderful if I had not been willing to move beyond even what looks like the finish line.
And most people are going to hear this, not see you, but we're doing Zoom, so I can see you. You just light up when you talk about the work that you're doing, and you talk about making a contribution. And that really is what we all want for ourselves, the people around us, our children, our parents, our friends. Whatever you're doing, light up talking about it, and take the risk, because if you never take the risk, you never know how you could have contributed. It's just fun to watch.
Thank you. And I it's like, and we talk about things like fulfillment, which to me is just, again, achieving on your own values and priorities, not somebody else's. One easy sort of reaction is, well, that's nice. If you have money, that's nice. It seems like a luxury thing. And I just fundamentally disagree. I think this idea of learning to make decisions, not based on what other people think, but who you really are, what you value the most, what gets you up and out of bed in the morning, is the most reliable path to a life that is like satisfying and enriching. And also, again, making your best contribution, because you don't have to choose between those two things. Like, think about the world if most people get up and they get to use their individuality, their distinctiveness, their passions to do something that's fulfilling for them and makes their best contribution. I mean, just think about the kind of world we could have. And so we're just leaving so much on the table, because we're still stuck in an industrial mindset where there's not enough to go around, and some people have to lose, and talent's a bell curve, and it's almost innate. It's nonsense, and we can do so much better.
It's a proverb, not a proverb biblical, but a saying that I've read, and I love it, and it speaks so well to what you're talking about. And I'm going to get the words probably a little bit wrong, but I'm going to be close, which is, a candle loses no light when it lights another candle, right? And it's exactly what you're talking about, that we can share and we can give, and that doesn't take anything away from us.
Yeah. I mean, the work that we do now at Populace, my think tank, is all about what we call positive sum systems, right? Systems that create abundance. And that's what we have both in an economy, but also on the psychological side. Your happiness does not diminish my happiness. In fact, as we've seen from lots of research, there is actually a contagion effect. So actually, if you're happy, people within 3 degrees of you in your network have a high probability of increasing their own happiness for free, right? It's crazy. So once you realize that people being able to pursue meaning and purpose in their lives and being happy benefits all of us, right? It's just, we just have to get out of that mindset that the world is this dark place that somebody's got to lose, and realize that each one of us has something to contribute. And to the extent that we're willing to commit to each other and develop each other's potential, we're all better off.
And also the way that you talk about it is an and system, not a but system, right? I feel like we're back to enemas again. This whole thing has just been like a whole bunch of anima jokes, but sorry, I have teenage boys. Forgive me. So if we think about the and system, that I can receive happiness, meaning, and purpose by being around people, and they can be different from me.
Yeah, and in fact, what's great is in positive sum systems, the more difference that exists, the bigger the return on the investment, right? The worst thing in the world is for everyone to be the same as I am, right? Like, not only do we get stuck, we get no innovation, but like, again, variety is the spice of life. And so what I think is most troubling in society right now is because we keep trying to standardize everything and we keep trying to treat like individuality as somehow selfish, right? Versus my distinctiveness, the things that motivate me, the things I care about, like those are the things to cultivate. Those are the things to help me contribute to society. When you're in a society where you feel like nobody's betting on you, right? Nobody really cares, like, then why would you care back, right? And so the ability to say at some point you want to turn this around, that's up to us, right? We're going to have to trust each other more. We're going to have to be willing to invest in each other. The good news is we see time and time again in the research, when you do that, the dividends are incredible. So for me, it starts with rethinking a lot about our institutions and then thinking about the kind of culture that really does respect the dignity of every person and their differences.
I feel like we're sitting in a Harvard class right now for, I don't want to say average people because that's not fair and that isn't, but like you don't need to have a PhD to understand what you're talking about. And it resonates so well with what we're seeing in the world, because I think for almost everyone, and again, I don't have the data, but I suspect that you can back me up here. Most people feel like something is off right now. Like there's something that just isn't, it doesn't matter if I'm in the popular, like the majority group or the minority group and whatever that might be. There's like this dissonance of like something just isn't right, which is why I think the Ted Lassos, the Marilyn Diamonds, we can all say, okay, I can't define it. I don't have a white paper on it, but something feels right. So
look, you are exactly correct. And I'll bring it back. So my next book that comes out on February 1st is on called Collective Illusions, brought it up, which is in a combination because of how our brains work, which I can say more about, and then our technologies. We are, again, fundamentally wrong about the majority. And so I think the most common thing I hear from people is, did everybody else just go crazy? Like almost overnight? Like what happened? Like something, we just have lost the plot. Like something is wrong. And here's my argument. And we have more data than anyone in the country on this topic. And I'm telling you, it's not true. It is an illusion. It is a collective illusion. We believe that other people no longer share our values. We believe that they want different things, and it is not true. But we don't really understand how to make sense of it. And so imagine if you woke up and you think most of your neighbors literally are like, I don't know, communists now, like whatever. It's like, and you're like, wait, I thought we all cared about like individual rights. Like, no, sorry, like, would you trust them? Probably not, right? Would you feel like any kind of like connection to them? No, and so this is what's happening all over the country, and it's not true. And so that's the bad news, but it's also the good news, because these illusions are powerful, but they're fragile because they're a lie, right? And it comes back to like, we have a role to play in puncturing those illusions. And it means having the conversations, talking to each other. I promise you, half of what you think about most people in this country is just not true. And if you just try it, like have a conversation with your neighbor and you will be shocked at what you have in common. And if we can get to that place, like we can build the trust back, we can get to a better place, but it starts by having the conversation.
And when you have the conversation, start with the mindset of, I'm going to discover what's the same and not what's the difference.
Yeah. Look, it's interesting, like at a neuroscience level, these two things that have happened. So one, we have a conformity bias. Our brains crave being with the group. Nobody likes to be isolated from the group. The problem is we're terrible at estimating what the group really thinks. So evolutionarily, our brains do this really stupid workaround that doesn't work anymore. Instead of like actually counting heads, like what do most people think? The shortcut is the loudest voices repeated the most are the majority. Now, that was fine 100 years ago, but in a social media age, what it's allowed is a vocal fringe to masquerade as consensus. And so that's what we're seeing. It's like, you go online and it's like, really? Like all these people think this? And you're like, I guess that's what we believe, right? And it's just not true. We just haven't adapted to these technologies yet. But it gives this sense that you're out of step with your group. And so a lot of us will conform to be with the group. And it's not true and it's not healthy. And we got to get back to having the conversation, assume good intent, and look for that commonality. And you'll be shocked at how common it really is.
So you mentioned your book, and I'm glad you did. You can pre-order it now on Amazon. We'll put links on. I'll do the commercial. You kind of did. I'll finish it. We'll put links on the Flip Your Script podcast website, and we'll promote it on social as well, because it resonates. It resonates in a way that if you're into data and you love reading about research, I believe it's going to resonate. And if you like just learning more and understanding the world we live in, because it has changed, but people haven't, right? What we are on the inside and what we're all seeking is the same. So is the book written in a way that someone can pick it up and read it as an enjoyment, or is it written in a way that I'm going to need to be of sound, lucid mind, and I can look at the spreadsheets for 2 minutes?
No. So everything I write, to me, it's about respecting the audience, and it's about like, I'm the one that has something that I think is important. So it's on me to meet you where you're at and respect your time. So everything I write, including End of Average from before, Dark Horse, and now Collective Illusions, it's really meant, first of all, I get bored easier than anyone I know. So I pride myself on good storytelling and I'm respecting people's attention and time. So to me, this one is about really understanding this idea of these collective illusions, why they happen, how we end up complicit in them. Most importantly, what do you do as an individual? How do you inoculate yourself against them, and how do you start contributing to a world that doesn't have them? I'm biased, but I think you'll enjoy it.
And isn't it ironic that we started this whole thing with, how you flipped your script, and now I'm saying to you, someone who the 0.9 GPA, like, is your book too heady for the average person to understand? Like, that's literally where we've gone in your life, is that you put the Harvard professor on it, and suddenly people assume like, I'm not sure I can resonate. So I asked you the question because I don't want people to put you in this category of someone that no longer speaks English anymore. And I think if you've listened to this podcast and you're still with us, you know that obviously you do speak English and you speak to the common understanding and mindset, because otherwise, I mean, you've done that for the last hour.
Yeah, look, I mean, here's the thing. Like, being smart doesn't mean being esoteric and coming up with words that nobody else knows. It's like one of my intellectual heroes, a physicist named Richard Feynman, who's long since passed away. He once said, if you can't explain it to an intelligent first year like college student, you don't understand it. Like, you don't. So I took that to heart. Like, it's not enough to think you know it, and then because people can't understand what you're saying, they must be stupid. Like, real intelligence is the ability to understand something and communicate it in a way that everyday people can say, I got it. You don't have to agree with me, but you'll understand. And so I pride myself on at least trying really hard, because as my dad always told me, like, you can be right or you can move people, and that's not the same thing. And I don't want to just be right.
And if you have all the data and no one else can understand it, is the data even valuable?
No, it's like, again, that's the problem with academia, frankly, is that like the incentive structure is so much about just staying in your own head and your little like cloistered environment. And it's like, I don't know. I just think there's so much we can accomplish in the world if we can accomplish it together. But that means sharing with each other what we think we know and what we think matters, and doing it in a way that other people can understand and act on.
And that's what I feel like this whole conversation has been. I appreciate how you've shared your story and your research and some of your findings, because I think it's the key to the fulfillment of the future. I was going to say success, but I stopped myself. What is there, as we wrap up, I ask everyone at the conclusion of the podcast, is there a quote or lyrics or something that you have that you'd like to share with us that maybe motivated you or kept you going on the difficult days?
Yeah, actually, there's one. I just pulled it up because I keep it with me. It's by Maya Angelou, and I've learned that making a living is not the same as making a life. And if we focus on making a life, really understanding who we are, our motives, our passions, discovering purpose, and turning that into contribution, man, the making a living takes care of itself, I promise you. But once we start trying to think about how we game the system to achieve success on other people's terms, it never, ever materializes as a happy, fulfilled life. So focus on who you are. The rest takes care of itself.
Thank you. What a great way to end. Appreciate your time. Look forward to reading your next book and whatever is next, because you've told us that you're someone who continues to take risks and to learn. So I don't think this last book is your last book. Your next book is probably not your last book.
Correct. I appreciate it. Hey, it was really great to talk with you.
So many things about what Todd said have resonated with me. I certainly hope they've resonated with you. Believe in yourself, believe in others. How can you make your best contribution, which includes helping someone else make their best contribution? And probably the two words that we all need just to wrap it up, Marilyn Diamond. My hope is Todd's story empowers you to believe you're capable of more than you think, to discover motivation, to uncover inspiration, and to find the strength to turn the page.
Thank you for listening to Flip Your Script, hosted by Kristi Piehl and produced by Media Minefield. If you like our message, please be sure to give us a 5-star rating, subscribe to the show, and share our episodes with your family and friends. Do you or someone you know have a story about flipping your script? We'd love to share it. Contact us on our website, flipyourscriptpodcast.com. To stay up to date on all things Flip Your Script, make sure to follow host Kristi Piehl on social media. You can also check out the website for pictures, resources mentioned in the show, and other great episodes.